Clara Bow, the original It Girl. Clara Bow was the face of the 1920s, the true It Girl whose charm captured the carefree spirit of the Jazz Age. Her eyes sparkled with mischief, her smile lit up the silent screen, and audiences adored her as the flapper who embodied freedom and fun. Born in 1905 in Brooklyn, Clara grew up in poverty and chaos. A troubled home life pushed her to escape into films, and in 1921, she won a contest that propelled her to Hollywood. By her early 20s, she was starring in hits like It, 1927, a film that cemented her as a cultural phenomenon. Newspapers hailed her as the personification of the modern girl. But with fame came pressure. The studio system worked Clara relentlessly, while tabloids spun rumors that painted her as reckless and wild. Her Brooklyn accent drew criticism when talkies arrived, even though she starred successfully in early sound pictures. Despite her adaptability, the constant scrutiny wore her down. Behind the bright laughter, Clara felt deeply isolated. She once confessed, "All the time the flapper is laughing and dancing. There's a feeling of tragedy underneath." That tragedy weighed heavily as the spotlight became unbearable. In 1933, at just 28 years old, Clara Bow walked away from Hollywood. She married actor Rex Bell, moved to a Nevada ranch, and never returned to the screen. Fans were stunned. How could the biggest star of the Jazz Age simply vanish? Greta Garbo, the woman who wanted to be alone. Few stars in Hollywood history have loomed as large as Greta Garbo. In the 1920s and 30s, she was cinema's ultimate enigma, a magnetic presence whose face alone could hold the screen. Audiences adored her elegance and mystery. Yet in 1941, at the very height of her fame, Garbo vanished from Hollywood and never returned. Born in Sweden in 1905, Garbo was working in a department store when she caught the eye of a local film director. By her early 20s, she had moved to Hollywood, where MGM quickly realized they had found someone extraordinary. Films like Flesh and the Devil, 1926, Anna Christie, 1930, and Camille, 1936, turned her into one of the most bankable stars in the world. Her nickname, the Swedish Sphinx, reflected her aloof persona. She avoided interviews, rarely attended premieres, and carefully guarded her private life. In 1930, MGM's ads for Anna Christie famously declared, "Garbo Talks," her first sound role, which silenced critics and cemented her place in the new era of talkies. But Garbo was restless. She disliked the publicity machine, and as the 1940s began, her films drew smaller audiences. When Two-Faced Woman, 1941, flopped, Garbo quietly ended her contract and retired. She was only 35 years old. Fans waited for her comeback, certain she would return to the screen. Decades passed, and it never happened. Eleanor Powell, the Queen of Tap, who stepped away in the golden age of the Hollywood musical, no dancer shone brighter than Eleanor Powell. In the 1930s, MGM promoted her as their answer to Fred Astaire, a tap-dancing marvel whose athletic grace thrilled audiences. Yet by the mid-1940s, Powell's career disappeared almost overnight, leaving fans stunned. Born in 1912 in Massachusetts, Powell trained in ballet before discovering tap as a teenager. Her speed, precision, and stamina made her one of the most technically gifted dancers of her generation. Broadway soon noticed, and by the mid-30s, she was in Hollywood, where MGM cast her in dazzling showcases like Born to Dance, 1936, and Broadway Melody of 1940, opposite Fred Astaire. Astaire himself once called her the only female dancer who could match him step for step. Audiences agreed. Powell's athleticism, combined with her radiant smile, made her one of MGM's top stars. She was even nicknamed the Queen of Tap. But Hollywood's tastes shifted quickly. By the early 1940s, musicals grew less popular, and the studio system sought new faces. Powell, still in her prime, found herself sidelined. Her marriage to actor Glenn Ford in 1943 also pulled her further from the spotlight. Within a few short years, she retired from film altogether. Deanna Durbin, the girl who walked away. In the late 1930s and 40s, Deanna Durbin was Hollywood's sweetheart. With her radiant smile and crystal-clear soprano voice, she became Universal Pictures' biggest box office star. Yet at the height of her career, in 1948, she made a decision that shocked the world. She retired at just 27 years old and never looked back. Born Edna Mae Durbin in Canada in 1921, Deanna was only 14 when she signed with Universal. She skyrocketed to fame in her first film, Three Smart Girls, 1936. A musical comedy that not only saved the studio from bankruptcy, but also made her an overnight sensation. By her late teens, she was one of the highest-paid women in America. Audiences adored her wholesome image. She was marketed as the cheerful girl next door, whose bright optimism contrasted with the uncertainty of the Depression and World War II years. She sang effortlessly, often portrayed as the sensible young woman who saved her on-screen family from trouble. But behind the roles, Deanna longed for something different. She wanted more serious parts, opportunities to stretch beyond musicals and ingenue roles. Universal resisted, preferring to keep her in the formula that guaranteed profits. Growing frustrated, she began rejecting projects. By 1948, after For the Love of Mary, Deanna walked away from films entirely. Her exit stunned fans. Unlike many stars who faded gradually, Deanna disappeared completely. Mary Pickford, the girl who owned Hollywood. Mary Pickford was more than a movie star. She was America's sweetheart and one of the most powerful figures of Hollywood's silent era. She co-founded United Artists, shaped the early industry, and became one of the world's first global celebrities. Yet in the 1930s, at the height of her fame, she retired from acting and never returned. Born Gladys Smith in Toronto in 1892, Pickford began acting on stage as a child before moving into films in the 19-teens. With her golden curls and expressive eyes, she became the face of silent cinema. She specialized in youthful, plucky heroines, often playing characters much younger than her age. Audiences adored her innocence and resilience, and by the 1920s, she was one of the most recognized women in the world. Alongside Charlie Chaplin, Douglas Fairbanks, and D.W. Griffith, she co-founded United Artists in 1919, giving herself unprecedented creative control. She was not only a star, but also a shrewd businesswoman, shaping her own destiny in an industry dominated by men. But the arrival of sound proved complicated. Pickford's voice was fine, but audiences no longer wanted to see her in youthful roles. Her 1929 Talkie Coquette earned her an Academy Award, yet the public was not eager to watch America's sweetheart grow up. By the mid-30s, she retired from acting altogether. She lived the rest of her life away from the screen, becoming a Hollywood legend whose image remained frozen in the silent era. Pickford herself once said, "I never liked one of my pictures in its entirety." Her perfectionism and self-awareness made her decision final. She never made a comeback. Grace Kelly, the princess who left Hollywood. Grace Kelly's story reads like a fairy tale. In the 1950s, she was one of Hollywood's most admired actresses, elegant, graceful, and radiant on screen. Then, at just 26, she stunned the world by walking away from Hollywood to become Princess of Monaco. Born in Philadelphia in 1929, Grace came from a wealthy family but pursued acting against her parents' wishes. Her striking beauty and poise quickly made her a favorite of directors. She starred in High Noon, 1952, Mogambo, 1953, and The Country Girl, 1954, for which she won the Academy Award for Best Actress. Alfred Hitchcock cast her in classics like Rear Window and To Catch a Thief, cementing her as one of the decade's brightest stars. At the height of her career, Grace traveled to the Cannes Film Festival in 1955, where she met Prince Rainier III of Monaco. Their courtship captivated the world, culminating in a wedding in 1956 that was dubbed the Wedding of the Century. From that moment, Grace retired from acting, leaving Hollywood behind forever. Though fans hoped she might return, palace duties and her role as princess made that impossible. Hitchcock even tried to lure her back for one final film, but the idea was vetoed by the monarchy. Montgomery Clift, the sensitive rebel. In the late 1940s and 50s, Montgomery Clift was hailed as one of Hollywood's most gifted actors. With his striking looks and soulful performances, he brought a new kind of vulnerability to the screen, influencing an entire generation of actors. Yet, just as quickly as he rose, his career unraveled, leaving behind one of Hollywood's most haunting stories. Born in 1920 in Omaha, Nebraska, Clift was drawn to the stage as a teenager and became a Broadway star by his early 20s. Unlike the typical matinee idols, he sought roles of depth and complexity. His Hollywood debut came in 1948 with Red River, opposite John Wayne, followed by The Search, which earned him his first Academy Award nomination. Critics immediately recognized his talent, praising his naturalism and emotional honesty. Through the early 50s, Clift seemed unstoppable. Films like A Place in the Sun, 1951, and From Here to Eternity, 1953, cemented him as both a critical and box office favorite. Alongside Marlon Brando and James Dean, he was part of a new wave of actors who rejected old-fashioned stiffness for raw realism. But in May of 1956, tragedy struck. After leaving a party at Elizabeth Taylor's home, Clift crashed his car into a telephone pole. The accident left his face permanently scarred and his health severely compromised. Though he continued working, his appearance and physical pain changed the trajectory of his career. His performances after the accident, such as in The Misfits, 1961, and Judgment at Nuremberg, 1961, still displayed flashes of brilliance, but behind the scenes, he struggled with chronic pain, dependence on alcohol and medication, and declining health. Studios grew wary of casting him, and offers dwindled. By the mid-60s, Clift had all but disappeared from Hollywood's center stage. George Reeves. Superman in Chains. In the early 1950s, George Reeves soared into the homes of millions as Superman, the Man of Steel. With his square jaw, confident smile, and reassuring voice, he became a symbol of hope to children across America. Yet behind the cape was a man struggling to escape the shadow of his most famous role, a role that ultimately confined him rather than elevated him. Born George Kiefer Brewer in Iowa in 1914, Reeves pursued acting after a brief stint as a boxer and singer. He landed a small part in Gone with the Wind in 1939, but struggled for years to find steady work. Then came the opportunity that would define him forever: the television series Adventures of Superman, which premiered in 1952. The show was a phenomenon. Reeves became a household name, adored by young fans who believed he truly was Superman. But with success came typecasting. Casting directors struggled to see him as anything other than the Man of Steel. Reeves longed to prove his range. He wanted to play serious, dramatic roles. But Hollywood's doors closed on him. His attempts at directing and finding new opportunities stalled. He appeared in a few small films and guest spots, but nothing freed him from the cape. Privately, Reeves grew frustrated. Friends later recalled him saying, "Everyone remembers me as Superman, but no one remembers me as an actor." By the late 1950s, work had nearly dried up. The boyish optimism that once made him a perfect Superman became a cage, and Reeves, still relatively young, found himself adrift in an industry that had already moved on.